Good evening and welcome to our second series of Consultants Corner. In today's new era where collaborations and partnerships are becoming more prevalent and important, it is our belief that an open narrative and sharing of ideas is vital. The industry possesses some exceptional operators, consultants, and contractors, and our aim is to bring better insights into the thinking which can often lie hidden away. Our aim will be to bring a fresh voice, and by interviewing our consultants, contractors, and operators. I'm Maxine Crow, your host, and we've got Kat Bambaku, your co-host, and we are joined by Julian Fris. Now, Julian isn't new to Consultants Corner. He was on last year. We learned all about him. So Julian's a highly experienced FM and catering consultant who runs Neller Davies, covering strategy, procurement, contract management, change management, in sectors including healthcare, B&I, the arts, media, and education, just to name a few. Julian, welcome to Consultants Corner again. It's so great to have you on.
Yeah, it's nice to be back. Thank you.
So this series, we're really looking at delving a bit deeper into thought leadership and your knowledge and insights. So we're calling this series is called The Big Question. So this evening's big question is about collaboration and partnership. So Julian, would you like to share your insights on collaboration and partnership? We'll probably chip in with some questions as well, but it'd be great to actually hear your views, and let's just get really under the skin of this exciting topic.
Right. So we are very much into collaboration, engagement, bringing parties together to get better outcomes, because it's about, in the end, we spend too much time with the old processes, if you like, which is very much muscular. It's all us and them, buyer, supplier. Buyer says, I want this. Supplier comes in, works in a kind of in a second tier type approach, feels that they're not really engaged in the process. And what we get is the buyer suggests that this is what we want as a service. The supplier provides that. But invariably, it's all done on a procurement basis where the best price wins, and sometimes it's the cheapest price. You don't always get value for money, and I think there's too much of this, driving the cost down to the bottom. Once you start doing a more financially based approach, you lose anything in collaboration. It's all about protection, and people go into a defense mode, and they'll put up all sorts of tactics to make sure, one, that they deliver their profit back to their organization, make sure they retain the contract. But at the same time, things don't happen. Things start not happening. For example, if you bid for something and you find you're about £1 million short, the back stairs don't get cleaned. The maintenance doesn't get done so often. The quality of the food deteriorates. And we've all seen that. And then what happens then? All the money you potentially saved is all wasted on arguing, bringing lawyers in, if it gets at that particular stage, or re-procuring. So isn't it better just to say, let's just sit down and work out what we're, and co-create this kind of situation where, look, we're the suppliers are the experts in providing the service, we're the client, we hold a load of information and data about how we can help you, but let's sit and work this thing through. I'll talk a bit later on about some examples, but fundamentally, what we've been trying to do in more recent contracts, and certainly some we've just awarded, it's we have to work in a transitional phase, because you can't change everybody from being all polarized to be all lovey-dovey right in the middle, all collaborating. So it takes a bit of time. Everybody's got to learn. People have got to go with it and understand the culture, the behaviors, and the whole piece, because if you don't do that, it will never happen. So things like you sit down and work out what your shared vision is, you work out what your desired outcomes are, you work out a kind of statement of intent which says this is what our organization's about, and this is both parties together to come out with delivering a facilities management or catering solution. So it's fundamentally that, but it's not just going and putting a piece of paper out with a specification on it. It's going with a blank sheet of paper with a few aspirations and vision, and then building on that together in the same room, workshopping it through to get to a conclusion. And in that way, everybody's then bought into the vision. Yeah, most people do, some don't. There's opportunities to do other things, but fundamentally, collaboration will deliver you better outcomes. We can say, because we've been doing some projects, and it's more in-house type thing, it wasn't a vested thing, but where we've done something where we've involved the staff, where they've said, you've listened to us, and we've developed a catering solution in a healthcare environment, we have seen amazing benefits from getting the staff involved. And one of the big figures is we got a 47% increase in staff productivity. And that translates into gross profit. It translates into better customer service and all that other kind of stuff. So you can see we're approaching it not from the balance sheet or the cost control, the cost improvement program, or deflators, or whatever you like to call them. We're approaching it from the people on the ground who are actually providing the service: managers, staff, customers, everybody.
We've had a couple of comments in, actually, Julian. So Michael Struble, hi Mike. He basically says it's not always possible with public procurement to take that collaborative approach, but pre-procurement consultation is the best way forward. What would you say to that?
I don't think. I think we work heavily in the public contracts regulations, and I take the point. It is difficult because it is all predisposed to a particular process. We end up, and for those in the know, there's a bunch of different processes in the public contracts regulations, which sort of range from restricted, which is like, well, that's what you're going to give us. That's it. You've got no opportunity to negotiate or discuss it. That's what's on the paper. And if what's on the paper is wrong, that's when you get these bad behaviors where things go off on a tangent and you don't get the service. But there are other variants of that one. We have been, and I think you are, Maxine, a proponent of competitive dialogue. Yeah. Fantastic. You get everybody in a room. You can build up if you're not entirely clear on your strategy and your specification, you can work that up together with a bunch of suppliers to a point where you put your final tender in. Although I would say that final tender it gives you an opportunity to do something different, but the final tender is very much that's what it is. What we've been trying to look at is how we can expand the vested mentality into the public sector, and there is a way. Partly we're doing some of it by stealth because we're introducing it into the contracts we're doing where it's permissible to do that, and then we can do it. But you've got to be clear to everybody that's how you're going to do it. And I tell you, that's highly successful because the service providers we talk to are extremely interested in doing that because, one, they want to stay in business. They don't go out to mess it up. They go out to do a good job because they want to win more work. And I think the client's in the same position. But what you've got to remember in public contracts, what happens is, so in a private sector, it's more likely the client's going to be engaged directly with the supplier so they can talk up what they need. Not in all cases, but let's just put that as a model. In public sector, oh no, you don't do that bit. The procurement and sales do that bit. So they kind of negotiate the contract or determine the contract, probably a better word. Meanwhile, the people on the ground who've got to provide it both from the supplier side, the operational team, and the client the supplier, the buyer, the client side, they had some involvement, but suddenly they handed this thing, both of them going, well, we can't make this work, and then they're pitched into a battle not of their own making. And I think that's where we get this drive down to the bottom. And we've seen some major issues within the facilities management market over the years with companies going bust or having to merge or whatever through negative actions. And it doesn't get there. But what we've been looking at is the frameworks, more flexible frameworks can work a little bit better where you can select the companies you need through a predetermined process, and then you can bring them on board and develop them up to deliver your more vested solution. But I have to agree to a certain extent, it's still on the way, and we have to do more of these projects, because once you've done some of them and people see the benefits, it's more likely it's going to happen. But we did, the amusing part is that I saw a document last year, I think it was the government, or the year before, the government's strategy on collaboration or facilities management procurement, and I got it, and I typed in did the word search and typed in collaboration. It came up once.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, somebody said, some wag on LinkedIn said, I'm surprised it came up that many times. But you see, it's very much, it's not just the suppliers, it's the buyers as well. Everybody's got to kind of change and have more trust in each other to deliver. Yeah. This you do what I tell you to type thing.
Yeah. And Andy Jones, hi Andy, nice of you to join us. He just said that there was a comment there where he just said that always are just outdated and costly.
He's absolutely right, and I know Andy very well from the healthcare market. We could write a book or several books on this. The old way of thinking. We're not talking about what happened, pre-COVID. Let's just say, there's a realization that if we're going to move forward, we've got to do things differently. The amount of money that is wasted through this kind of adversarial approach is phenomenal. And just in the hospital scenario, and just saying catering, where it fails, the money's wasted not providing the service is shocking. Where they could actually pick that money up and invest it back in the service. Now, the hospital, better hospital kind of program that run by NHS England, which we're on, is trying to make it clearer to people to understand wastage, get better practices, and so forth. But you've got to change the people in the organisation, and some of them need some help. I'm not going to criticise them, because they are in the situation they are. That's the culture of the organisation, and we are talking about 1.4 million people more that work for the NHS, and it's quite difficult to change practices. It takes time. But what they do, and I have to be fair to them as others, is if you do something, you have to be a slight maverick. You have to do something, but if you're going to do that, you have to demonstrate you can do it. And if you can do something that's phenomenal, and we've done a couple of catering jobs, you might see me post up every so often, they've been amazing, and they've got people interested. And it's getting the people on the boards interested, because they're the ones that make the decision, because they're sitting above the process. And at that particular point, they're the ones they're the agents of change, but they need people to help them. That's what we do. So we kind of facilitate it on their behalf, but we have to make sure it works.
Yeah, I guess it's a lot more than just the quality or the service. I guess collaboration brings innovation, which sometimes you don't know what the outcome will be out of a constructive discussion, right?
Well, look, this is an interesting one, because in one particular job we did it slightly differently, and there was another catering job. I'll just take that as an example. It was in Ireland. If we'd have gone through the traditional process, we'd have got the same old. It was okay, but it wasn't fantastic. What we wanted was a catering service that was, had a high level of provenance, that it was net zero. But besides all that, it produced food we wanted, as opposed to what you were dictated to. And then we also thought, actually, if we go down the normal route of evaluation of these contracts, which says price and quality, and then you put the two together and you get this thing called MEAT, most economically advantageous tenderer. So probably to any vegans, because that's a mnemonic that goes around. But that comes up with this score. And that score is a score because somebody's done a great bid. What you get is that the quality people can only read the quality bit, and the finance people only read the finance bit. So we felt, well, a good company or an effective company would write a fantastic bid and then write a really cheap thing. So when they put it together, they're going to win it, aren't they? Because they're good. So we said, no, we're going to tell you what we're going to pay you, and you're just going to bid on quality. That changed the game. Suddenly, we went through a a process, a light touch scenario where we could select the bidders. And we went to companies, we did some market engagement, found out what they could do for us and said, right, do you want to do this job? And they went, yeah, we're interested in bidding. And they stayed in. And we appointed a company who would have never, ever got involved before. The quality of food is amazing. And that's taken it on further. In fact, the organisation has decided to give free food to its staff because it's in quite a highly competitive environment in Dublin. And the benefits of that, they're not seeing it necessarily in the cost of catering, but they're seeing it in the benefits of retention, productivity, well-being, networking, because suddenly everybody's going to the restaurant and it's a buzzing hub now as opposed to what it was before. Yeah, so there's so many benefits for an organisation if I think about it, and the cost of catering in a lot of places, when you compare it to other things that happen, is actually quite low. FM slightly different because you've got to maintain buildings and you've got to do something a bit different, and each different element of that's got its own kind of characteristics. But certainly for something that's very customer facing is going to deliver you better benefits. And if we'll wind back to the hospital scenario, absolutely, if you get the food right, you get better outcomes. You get better healthcare outcomes, you get better productivity from the staff, you get better engagement, and so on and so forth. So and collaboration falls into that, because once everybody's an expert on food, aren't they? They're experts on food. They sit in a room, they want to be warm or cold, where they want to be, lighting, all the stuff that's around them. Yeah. So get them involved, and then you'll get better outcome. But you've got to, but round it, it's not a free-for-all. Let me just say that. Collaboration works where you've defined the space you're going to collaborate in, because you can't just do everything. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a couple more comments here actually from, Andy's basically said, change changes culture, delivers better standards, and remember it's the staff and teams that deliver the difference. They're the ones on the front line. Empowerment and training will ensure that you deliver the standards and innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. We going back to that, one of the catering projects in healthcare where we were brought in to look at the catering, and they'd had the lowest rated engagement score across that group of hospitals in that area. And they were desperate to get. Not only did they want decent food, but they wanted to make sure that their staff were engaged and productive. And we just set up a program which brought them together. We asked them, fundamental right at the beginning. We asked them straightforward questions. My colleague Fraser, I'll give him the name check there. He asked 4 questions around what went well, what doesn't go so well, what irritates you, what gets you out of bed in the morning. Those kinds of things. And just a 20-minute chat or whatever, at least it starts getting things moving. And then you start building a program around that where they're involved and they can highlight stuff. It's a psychological safety is quite critical. You've heard me mention this before.
Yeah.
People are not fearful about speaking up, and being on the shop floor, they know more about it than perhaps management do. And having been in management, you're forced away from the front line to a certain extent, because you're particularly in a corporate environment, because you're spending all your time writing emails and going to meetings and all the other kind of stuff. And in the meantime, people just sort of carry on. But if you get their involvement and turn it around on its head, then you're going to get better outcomes. But you've got to incentivize them. And some organizations and public sector are quite constrained, and they're very fearful about incentivizing people or whatever. We see it in B&I can hear all my colleagues going, yeah, but here we have stars, awards, and all these other kind of things. It's there, but it needs to be a lot more. We need to turn it on its head, and that reverse triangle thing where the people doing the work on the front line are the people that are controlling the game, really, to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm. You talked before about vested, and for our audience that are listening that may not be familiar with that concept, is that a framework that you use for collaboration and partnership?
So Vested was set up by a lady called Kate Vitasic out of the University of Tennessee, and she'd come from a procurement background. I think she worked for Microsoft and people like that, and about 20 odd years ago, was commissioned by the US government to look at two military organizations, the Army and the Navy, and about their buying practices. And fundamentally, she discovered that the Navy, who were quite collaborative, got better deals, and it drove their cost down. So for everything, they were paying 40% less. They weren't involved in any disputes, and they had a very good working relationship with their suppliers. Whereas the Army, in that particular model, were very procedural, very restricted bid, and they were paying over the odds because there was an element of risk premium added in, all that other kind of stuff, because there were deductions and performance, all this kind of negative stuff, no trust. So where there's trust, there's an opportunity to collaborate. This vested opportunity, they've got about 140 projects across the world, which bring in the service provider and the buyer to talk through different elements and develop and co-create a contract in a collaborative manner. And the process goes through, it's like behavioral economics. And when you start, you set out the foundation of what you want to do. You create a shared vision, all right? So that's very much, and it's very workshop orientated, either face-to-face or online. You adopt guiding principles. So how are you going to act? So it's a whole kind of, you can see it's much more of a, it's much more guided, because you want everybody in that. It's a consensus-based approach. So everybody's got to agree. And in when you're building up a deal, it's not just the sales and the procurement people working together. The lawyers there, the accountants there, the operators there. The key at the top end, it's a two-in-a-box type thing. So the CEO of the buyer of organization links up with the CEO of the supplier, the buyer and supplier together, and that transcends the whole thing. So it's not like it's not man marking. It's much more of a joined up type approach where everybody's working together to the same ends. And as I said, around a framework, because, organizations say, well, we're not going to do that here, but on our facilities or catering, we're going to work together. Then there's a whole thing about negotiating as we. It's not about me, it's about we, all right? And there are several stages in this vested program. So the whole of the vested idea is that you sign a mutualized contract, a relational contract. Now, I can hear people gasping in horror that would sit down and basically marry their service provider, because that's basically, you could take it to the nth degree, but it's very much that we share. If we win, you win. If we lose, you lose, but we work out how we're going to do it together. So it's a bit like a joint venture without being a joint venture. It's just one stage off of that, but very much a integrated and symbiotic type approach. Now, getting to we is the one stage before that, I guess, and this is a project that we did for a bank where they had a facilities management issue. They went out and did the traditional bid, and it came back, they didn't like the solution, it didn't work for them, and it was all a bit too one-sided. So we then reversed it out, worked with the provider that we had. There were issues with that provider, but it was better to sit down with them and say, all right, guys, where are we going wrong? And there's this compatibility and trust analysis where we do a bit of a 360-degree assessment on each other, and then we can see where the issues are. And once we look at the relationship, the communications, all those other kind of things, we can see where the gaps are, and then we build up our solution together from that. Now, the process, you think, oh, that's going to take years. It takes about 6 months. Yeah. There's a whole load. I mean, I could sit here all day talking about it, because there's a whole load of material on it. So look on, there's plenty of stuff online to look at. But fundamentally, it's a rule-based thing. So I'll just finish off. So rule one is an outcome-based business model. Outcome, not output, outcome. Rule two is focus on the what, not the how. So it's not how are you going to do it. It's what are you going to do, and then work together how we're going to do it. So it's less about writing elongated specifications that are duplicating what you're already asking. This is about how you're going to set out your roadmap. Clearly defined measurable outcomes. pricing model with incentives. So I talked earlier on around deductions and payment mechanisms. No, this one works on the basis that we agree where what our boundaries are. If we can do better, then there's an incentive and people can improve their profit, the margin, all the other kind of stuff. And some of the projects we've done, we've actually shared that with the staff. And then the final one is about insight rather than oversight. So instead of us going around with a tick sheet, and it's much more together. Where did we go right? Lessons learned. All these kind of stuff we throw into our everyday language, but it's just focusing and you have there's no prejudice or discrimination between the parties. You're all in it together. So organisations like BP and Jones Lang LaSalle are involved with this. There's Johnson & Johnson and Sodexo. There's Procter & Gamble and Jones Lang LaSalle again. ISS are involved in things. Compass are involved, and predominantly America, but Canada, the Nordics, Australia, and there's other projects emerging across the world. People getting it, and Netherlands, because they're always quite forward thinking in the way they want to run their services.
Do you think vested would ever be adapted to the public sector? Because I know we do recognise that the private sector is always ahead in terms of innovation, in terms of collaboration, partnerships, and those things. So do you feel that one day the public sector would ever catch up or adapt a form of vested?
Yes, they will. And we're already having conversations with organisations to do exactly that. All right. So I think, ask me next year if you run a third series. But no, seriously, if we don't have a plan and we don't have a clear vision and we don't have any drive or ambition to do something, it will never happen. You're absolutely right. But there is. And I'm getting the sense that people need to know more. And this is what's the good thing about these kind of events is, you might not be convinced this time, maybe next time. You may not want to do it at all. It's not obligatory to do it, and there are benefits of doing things in the more transactional and performance managed way. But in the kind of things that we're running, I mean, I'm looking at today. I think I said I was doing some procurement work, and you're looking at a facilities management service with 11 streams to it, and each of those 11 streams have got their own different characteristics. And to try and buy that necessarily as a package is quite difficult, because well, they're great at security and they're great at laundry and they're great at this. They're not so good at that other bit, grounds or something like that. But in the end, you end up taking the highest scoring model, not necessarily the best model. And I'm not saying that to prejudice any process that we're running, but that's just the way it is at the moment. A lot of it is that where even in this kind of transactional thing, if the organization has a contract manager or somebody leading it from their perspective, there's more chance it's going to be collaborative. And on that vested thing, you don't necessarily start on day one doing it. You could do the getting to we bit where you get the culture right, but you could introduce it as you're going through. So say in year 2, you're thinking everything's settled down, we've implemented everything we need. We want to go further forward. How are we going to do it? So there's 2 ways of going about it. Either you're going to pay us a SIP, a cost improvement, or let's sit down and how we can work it out together, because they need each other. The clinicians in a hospital, the military, the people on the front line, all those people need to be involved because they're consuming the services, and that's who you're serving. Give them an opportunity to modify and improve the contract, as long as you're getting the economic benefit out of it.
Yeah. So Julian, where can, just remind the audience, where can they learn more about vested if they're interested in exploring it for their business, their companies?
Right, so if I remember off my head, www.vestedway.com. If you type that into your browser, you'll find it. If that's slightly incorrect, go into Google and just type in vested outsourcing. That should take it. There's a load of online free stuff in there. There's a load of books you can find on Amazon. I have this thing here, which is, I don't know, I'll send you some. Yeah, you can't see it. There's loads of books which will help, manuals and vested way. And there's lots of articles that come out in Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and other procurement various procurement papers as well. So you'll see more about it. And on LinkedIn, if you just link in with Kate Vitasic, there's quite a lot of stream of materials coming out through there, let alone all the other my colleagues.
I'll do a post after we've finished here, so that people in the audience can refer back to that. And we're at the top of our time already. It's like Kat, do you want to ask Julian anything else before we wrap up the session?
No, I don't. I was just having some thinking about the contracts. You've got your typical FM contracts for 5 years. Maybe the solution would be that we don't just see it as a strict 5-year contract, which is fixed. Maybe we call it implementation for year 1, year 2 to 3, improvement, and then 3 to 5 is, full execution. I think there's a lot of areas that they need to align for this to be successful.
Well, the new public contracts regulations are a little bit more open to that kind of approach, I believe. And certainly, if you've got a good, successful partner, there's an opportunity to extend it out. I'm not going to go into detail because you probably need to speak to a particular procurement lawyer who might give you that specific answer. But I think people recognise, but of course, when the government try to change any major legislation, it is all by consensus, and you have to, some things get beaten out of the system, other things get included in. But I think if through the current processes, if you manage it properly and you do it compliantly, I think there's a lot I know there's a lot you can do, even if it's slightly different. Even if you're using an in-house situation and perhaps partnering with someone, that's another way around it. There's a whole load of ways. Don't give up. There's plenty of opportunity.
I just wonder how much complacency plays a role to that. You just win a 5-year contract, everything is fantastic in the beginning, and then you get into year 3 and you just think about the renewal and the new tender. Maybe we need to keep everyone on their toes throughout the 5 years contract.
Well, I suppose if you're a CFO sitting in an organization with thousands of lines of budgets to look at, you probably don't want to end up doing it, and then that's why it ends up being quite commoditized. You just press a button. You're going to spend whatever on a procurement exercise. You know where you're going to get out at the end, and you move on. You've ticked the boxes compliant. That's the mistake you've actually got to do. So, but if you involved your staff, your colleagues in that particular process and do it in a much more holistic way, you're more likely to get things out of it. And when we're talking about the public sector, suddenly people think, well, they're all shareholders and stakeholders in the public sector. So if I go to a hospital or a school or whatever, if they get an opportunity to feel that they're part of it, you're going to get so much more out of them, aren't you? And look, John Lewis already worked that out. I might change their model with their kind of partnering model. Why not? It's, we're not reinventing the wheel. It's just that so many barriers have gone up because big companies have kind of dictated terms on their what they want out of it. Equally, governments and so forth, they're looking at cost control and all the other stuff. And I think we just got to move away from that and trust people a lot more. And then you'll get the outcomes you want.
I know in Asia, it's not uncommon to have a 5 or 10 year FM contract. They don't short-term contracts are not, well, they are around, but it's very common to have 5-year contracts, 10-year contracts. So
I think 5-year contract is a short term, but my view is that we observe the 5-year contract as if it's dying to the 5th year, but actually it should be blooming at that point, right? It should be at its maximum performance and innovation. But let's see.
If it's set up properly, absolutely. If it isn't, you're probably desperate to get to that 5 years. And I think it's a mixed bag, to be honest with you. I think contract length is just something that's put there. Sometimes a shorter contract length might be totally appropriate, depending on the size of the organisation, the risks they're going to take on. A there's a lot there, and so we could be here till midnight.
Julian, I feel we could quite easily carry on for another hour. But however, that said, we'd love to get you back on a bit later on in the year as well, to as with the discussions and questions evolve, and just get some more views from you. And just want to thank Kat for joining. Julian, thank you so much for your insights and your knowledge and sharing. For the audience for joining and listening in. As I said, I will share the information and some resources after this session finishes. So everyone, thank you for joining our first Consultants Corner of 2024. I'm Maxine Crowe, your co-host, and here we are, creating better understanding and insight and creating a new narrative. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.